There is a moment in the clip below where the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom does the one thing a Prime Minister is not supposed to do at the dispatch box. He loses his composure. Not in a shouting match, not in a Gerald Kaufman sense of theatre, but in a smaller, more telling way. The kind that gets noticed by the people who watch Prime Minister's questions for a living, and ignored by the people who don't. The question that triggered it lasted under 30 seconds. The reply lasted less than 10. And the gap between what was asked and what was answered is the entire reason this clip is being passed around, screen grabbed and circulated by people who, frankly, do not normally agree on anything. The MP asking sits on Reform UK benches. The Prime Minister at the dispatch box is the one whose net favourability rating in January, according to YouGov tracker, came in at -57. The lowest YouGov has ever recorded for any Prime Minister other than Liz Truss. The connecting thread between her question and his answer is a man whose name appears in the United States Department of Justice's Epstein files, who was sacked from the most senior diplomatic posting in the British government, and who Sir Keir Starmer himself admitted in his statement to the House on the 20th of April he should never have appointed in the first place. What followed should have ended a Prime Minister's authority on the spot. Walk through it with me, because the moment only lands if you understand the trap he walked into. To understand why this exchange matters, you have to start with a woman asking the question. Sarah Pochin is the MP for Runcorn and Helsby, Reform UK's first female MP. She holds, according to the House of Commons library figures, the smallest margin of victory in modern British by-election history, having overturned a Labour majority of 14,700 votes by a grand total of 6 votes in the by-election of May 2025. She is not a Westminster veteran. She is not a cabinet minister. And on this particular morning, in the final session of Prime Minister's questions, before the early prorogation of Parliament, that the Conservatives' Katie Lamb described to GB News as a cowardly attempt to dodge scrutiny ahead of the May local elections, she is allotted 30 seconds at the backbench dispatch box. 30 seconds is the standard length of a backbench question at PMQs. It is not a lot of time to land a punch on a Prime Minister with the entire machinery of number 10 sitting behind him. But 30 seconds is enough if you understand what you're doing. To ask one question that he cannot answer without conceding something he cannot afford to concede. She uses her 30 seconds to do exactly that. The way she frames it is not procedural. It is not policy wonk. It is the question that anyone who has read the news in the past 6 months has been wanting somebody to put to him on the floor of the Commons in front of the cameras, on Hansard record. According to the National Audit on Group-Based Child Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, published by the government in June 2025, the National Crime Agency has reopened more than 800 historic grooming gang cases. According to the Casey audit, at least 1,400 children were sexually exploited in Rotherham alone between 1997 and 2013. According to a 2020 study by academics at the University of Southampton and the University of Reading, reviewing 498 grooming gang convictions, 83% of the perpetrators were of Muslim background, mainly of Pakistani heritage. The same statistic is referenced in the Casey and Telford reports. That is the wallpaper of British public life. Every parent in this country has thought about it. Every survivor lives with it. And the Prime Minister, who on the documented record took 5 months of public pressure before agreeing to a national inquiry, is the same Prime Minister who, on the documented record, also pushed through the appointment of a man whose Epstein correspondence has now been released by the United States Justice Department. To understand what makes the answer he gives so revealing, you need to know what he was hoping not to be asked. What the Prime Minister was hoping not to be asked in the final PMQs before the spring recess is the question that joins those two stories together. Because for most of the spring, the Mandelson scandal has been managed. Just about. Sir Keir Starmer fired Peter Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to the United States in September 2025 after emails released by US officials showed Mandelson sending supportive messages to Jeffrey Epstein, while Epstein was facing charges of soliciting a minor. According to CNN's reporting on the 20th of April, Mandelson had been granted developed vetting clearance in January 2025, despite UK security vetting recommending that clearance be denied. According to The Guardian, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office invoked a rare authority to override that recommendation after Mandelson appointment had already been announced by number 10. Ollie Robbins, the Foreign Office's permanent secretary at the time of the appointment, was effectively dismissed and was grilled for 2.5 hours by the Foreign Heirs Select Committee. Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, resigned. Tim Allen, his Director of Communications, departed. The Cabinet Secretary, Chris Wormald, is being slowly eased out. And Anna Sawar, the leader of the Scottish Labour, has openly called for the Prime Minister to consider his position. That's the institutional wreckage in the room behind him when Sarah Pochin stands up to ask her question. The Prime Minister knows it's there. Every member of his own front bench knows it's there. And the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, sitting in the chair, knows it's there. Now hold that picture, because there is one more piece. The Office for National Statistics confirmed that inflation rose to 3.3% in March, the highest figure since December 2025. Households watching the clip below are not, broadly speaking, having a good year. The first MRP poll of 2026, published by More in Common, projected Reform UK on 381 seats, Labour on 85, the Conservatives on 70. The Statista YouGov tracker for May puts the government's net approval rating at -49, almost as low as the Conservatives' rating in the weeks before they lost the 2024 election. And in the same parliamentary fortnight, on the matter of grooming gangs, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, said in the chamber, in language reported by the New Statesman, that the Prime Minister only cares about victims when he is trying to save his own skin. Once that sentence has been spoken on the floor of the Commons by the leader of the opposition, it does not, politically speaking, leave the room. Sarah Pochin walks into that room with that wallpaper, with that MRP in the public domain, with that accusation already echoing in the chamber. And she asked the Prime Minister why he is spending his time, in the documented language of her question, putting friends of paedophiles into senior posts while the inquiry he resisted for 5 months is now staffing up. So if you think the institutional rubble already named is the worst of it, you are not even close. Because the same Prime Minister in the same parliamentary session would stand at the dispatch box and have to listen to the question you're about to hear. Which brings us finally to the room, the dispatch box, the question, and what came out of his mouth instead of an answer. Here it is, the exchange, the question that pinned him, the reply that should have never been a reply. The choreography of the moment is what makes it. Pochin stands up. She has the floor. She does not waste a syllable. She names Pakistani grooming gangs in those words, which is itself a category of statement that this Prime Minister, on the documented record, spent the early part of this premiership trying not to make. She names the victims. She names the abuse. And then in the same sentence, she joins all of it to the Mandelson appointment with a phrase so direct that even by Westminster's standards, it lands like a punch. She uses the language of pedophilia to describe the company a man Sir Keir Starmer personally appointed and has been documented to have kept. She does it in a single phrase. She makes the connection that the Prime Minister and his strategists have spent the entire spring trying to keep apart. Watch what happens to the room when she does. There is a small ripple on the Labour benches. The cameras, they pick it up. Reform members do not laugh, do not jeer, do not stage any of the theatre that the Hansard record sometimes captures. They simply wait. The Prime Minister, he rises. And the trap she has set is not in fact about grooming gangs at all. It is about him. Because to answer her substantively on the floor of the Commons with the cameras running, he would have to acknowledge the thing he has spent 6 months of public communication trying not to acknowledge. That the same judgment that brought Peter Mandelson into number 10's diplomatic corps is the judgment that the survivors of Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford and Oldham have been asking the British state to demonstrate on their behalf for 2 decades. He would have to concede in front of millions of viewers that the leader of the opposition's accusation about saving his own skin has a documented reason behind it. He cannot do any of that. So he does the other thing, the smaller thing. The thing a Prime Minister with 30 years in a courtroom and a stewardship from the Crown Prosecution Service on his curricula vitae should be the last person in the room to do. He reaches for the credential. He reaches for the "I was there" defense. He reaches for the line that says, in effect, the person standing in this room asking me this question doesn't have the standing to ask it. The answer he gives is short. It is under 20 words long. It's the kind of sentence a King's Counsel at the bar of England and Wales would, frankly, recognise as the move you make when you have run out of other moves. And the part that closes it, it is the part that should never, in a 30-year courtroom career, have come out of the mouth of the man who said it. It is not an answer to the question, it is a complaint about the questioner. And the people in that chamber on every bench hear the difference. Everything I've just walked you through was the warm-up. The 30-second question, the institutional wreckage, the vetting that was overridden, the Chief of Staff who's gone, the Permanent Secretary who's gone, the Cabinet Secretary on his way out, the polling at -49, the survivors who have been waiting 2 decades for the British state to look them in the eye. All of it lives behind those few seconds at the dispatch box. This is the moment. Watch.
Taking into account the point she's made.
Sir Poaching.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every day that the Prime Minister fails to act or even acknowledge Pakistani grooming gangs that rape and torture vulnerable white girls, more victims continue to suffer. Whilst he spends his energy forcing friends of paedophiles into top jobs, why not use that energy to stop this national disgrace?
Mr. Speaker, I spent many years prosecuting paedophiles who are now in prison, so I really don't need lectures from Reform about this.
Final question, Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.